Perfect. All right. So I'm here with Kevin Sweeney, who covers college basketball for Sports Illustrated. Want to talk to you a little bit about Loyola Chicago, who's joining the Atlantic 10. Obviously they're coming off some of their best years, 3 NCAA tournaments in the last 5, but also with a new coach. Can you talk a little bit just about, the next step for Loyola Chicago, this new chapter with Valentine coming in as a head coach?
Yeah, I mean, Drew did a really good job in year one. I think obviously he was fortunate in that he walked into a really, successful situation and culture and had, COVID year seniors who'd been around. I mean, he was the youngest head coach in Division One this past year, but simultaneously had one of the oldest teams with a super senior in Lucas Williamson, another super senior in Ahiru Guak. Both those guys were starters. They had Keith Clemens and Ryan Schwieger and Chris Knight. Like, this was a really, really old team. And I think that helped, bridge the gap to a younger head coach. But, I think it is a place where, the 2 runs that they had, obviously going to a Final Four, but also the Sweet 16, have delivered, a great deal of notoriety to the point where if there is a program that can be the next, VCU or the next Butler or the next, program that truly changes its trajectory based on an NCAA tournament run or two, it's Loyola Chicago. The feedback that they can get in recruiting in terms of the guys that they can get involved with, the recognition that the Loyola brand has is really strong. The commitment has been really good. Financially, they were prepared to pay over $2 million to try to keep Porter Moser. Drew Valentine's not near that right now, but could they get to that at some point if they want to try to keep him? I would think so. They have a great practice facility, small, but really, energized fan base right now. They sell out their, tiny arena. It's 4,000, 4,500 seats. And so I just think it's a place with a great deal of potential, great location. I'm like a mile from campus right now. It's beautiful. It's right on the lake. And so they pretty much have everything you could possibly want to sell in terms of being that mid-major power in this day and age.
Yeah. And, obviously joining the Atlantic 10, a step up, I view the Atlantic 10 is, more of a top tier mid-major in terms of its history and the teams they have. Is there, from a fan base perspective, in joining the Atlantic 10, even looking geographically, is there a lot of excitement for that? I mean, obviously, like I said, it is a step up, but, is there a little bit or any type of feeling that, maybe we kind of stay where we are, or is it mostly, an excitement to join the A10?
I'd imagine it's more excitement, from people around. I think there's just like a different level of opportunity that comes with playing the Atlantic 10, especially, I mean, the Valley has great history. It's a really fun league to be around. It's really well coached. It's really well scouted. Arch Madness, the conference tournament is as exciting as a conference tournament as there ever, there is every year. It just always seems to provide great moments. And I think, the Loyola would not be here without the Valley. I mean, they were only in the league for 10 years. The Valley helped them ascend into what they are now. But I think, the Atlantic 10 provides more doors to get at-large bids. It provides better, better conference scheduling, more national exposure on television. I think those are things certainly to be excited about. Better games that you're going to bring into your home gym. If you can get a Dayton, you can get a VCU, you can get some of those brands into the gym. I know they had a series schedule with Davidson. They got screwed up multiple times with COVID. That can now happen. So I think that things like that are really exciting for Loyola's fan base. And I think that's something, and I think at the end of the day, it really comes down to the multi-bits thing, right? Like, one of the reasons that Porter Moser left was the opportunity to get somewhere where he didn't feel like he needed to win the Missouri Valley tournament to feel safe, to feel like he can get into the dance. Because obviously once they got into the dance, they had a real chance both times. And so I think getting to a league where there's a little bit more confidence that if you come in third, you come in fourth, you're going to have a pretty decent chance. I think that is certainly something that excites and suits Loyola well right now.
Definitely. And you just, because I know you cover college basketball in general, in terms of where the Atlantic 10 is heading, I think, especially in college basketball, coaches make leagues sometimes more than players, especially, with one and dones and transfers, with Frank Martin coming in at UMass, Archie at URI. I know Dunphy, some people aren't as high, but at least it's a name. LaSalle is been desperate for some sort of momentum of tension, but especially with Miller, and Frank Martin, where do you think the Atlantic 10 is in terms of the possibility of kind of getting back to where it was in the 90s of becoming more of a solid 4-bid lead? Do you think that's possible with, kind of where they are moving forward?
I think it's hard mostly because I think there are kind of structural factors. It's harder to schedule than it ever was in terms of getting good non-conference games. Longer league seasons in the high major level certainly contribute to that. So I don't necessarily peg it on a bid number of, now it's a 2-bid league. It can be on a 4-bid league, this, that, the other thing. I just think that at the end of the day, like, programs and leagues that are successful are the leagues that invest and prove that investment by hiring good coaches and supporting those coaches with good support staffs and practice facilities and NIL at this point obviously is a huge part of this. And I think when you look around the Atlantic 10, you see schools doubling down in terms of their commitment. I mean, UMass has raised the bar in terms of what they were giving Matt McCall to get Frank Martin. That's a big deal. URI invested heavily. I don't have the number off the top of my head, but I know it's significantly more than what David Cox was going to get another year if he had stuck around.
Yeah.
Right?
No, they basically gave what Dan Hurley we wanted to give Dan Hurley 4 years ago. Yeah.
Right. Exactly. Then that's a level of investment that you need to raise the bar. And I think, Loyola certainly fits into that because of the way that they've started to invest, the fact that they have, a young coach, but have built a new facility in the last 5 years. They've done, things to make sure they have more support staff and things like that help, change the level at which you compete. And when you want to compete and stay competitive in recruiting and stay competitive in the college basketball landscape at this point, you need investment. And I think the A-10 is doing a good job of that. Obviously, the NIL kind of elephant in the room is its own war. And I think that's a fight that a lot of A-10 schools are starting to have to figure out. And how can they, nudge ahead and compete against high majors that have collectives that have these things, particularly at non-football schools. I think that's a big challenge is,
definitely.
If football has been driving the bus to form a lot of these collectives. If you're not at a football school right now, I think you're a little bit behind, but I think that's more transitory than anything else. I think in 2 to 3 years, you get to something that's more settled in terms of how you can recruit in the new age.
Definitely. And last question. I mean, I know, I think it was just a couple of days ago. Obviously, Loyola got a couple of big commitments. I know from Simeon High School, Miles and Wes. I played briefly some college basketball at North Park University. I remember watching Derrick Rose at Simeon High School. How important is it for Loyola to obviously recruit in such a basketball-rich city like Chicago? And if you have any, kind of analysis on those two commitments and, what that means for the program moving forward.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think Chicago is everything in any school. I think particularly at a place like Loyola, I think you have the ability right now to recruit not just nationally, but internationally, right? I mean, they can get incredible feedback and we're involved with some big time international recruits throughout last year, and I'm sure they will be again this year. But look, I mean, it'd be crazy to say that landing 2 kids from Simeon, one of them is a top 150 recruit, doesn't matter, particularly when DePaul, the Big East school in your backyard, also wanted both of those kids and had both of them on official visits, and they chose Loyola. That's a big deal. Like, that matters. I think Miles Rubin, I've watched him more than I've watched Wes. Miles has a chance. I mean, he's a really talented rim protector. I think he's a guy who's going to be able to make an impact defensively right away once he gets to campus, and has a lot of upside that he can tap into going forward offensively. And I don't think it's necessarily, Loyola needs to build a wall around Chicago, but I think it helps your program when you have local kids. And Lucas Williamson's a great example of that. 5-year guy, was, a contributor there as a freshman when it went to the Final Four and to Sweet 16s. It was the best player and has a chance to crack into the NBA now. And that was a great story, but that was something that they could sell to a fan base that was growing and emerging. Was, hey, we've got this kid who went to Whitney Young High School who is a great ambassador for this place. Like legitimately, like, I have talked to Lucas Williamson enough times to say that, like, if he runs for mayor of Chicago someday, I will vote for him. And I do not think that it's crazy to say that he will run for mayor. Like, he is that type of person. And recruiting kids like that from the city of Chicago, I think, helps grow a burgeoning fan base and build excitement about this thing. So no question, Big Gats, they're recruiting at a high level. They're identifying kids and can get in the mix with a really high caliber of kid right now because of the brand and because of how Drew is as a recruiter, and their staff is really, really engaged. So I think that those things help, but the fact that it's 2 Chicago kids probably puts the cherry on top.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, thank you so much. I know you're busy. I appreciate it. And, we're looking forward to some Chicago trips. I'll tell you that. That's great for the A-10.
It's a beautiful thing. I mean, it's going to be great for the league. I'm excited to get some teams in.